Milo Shuzan said it before Tuesday night's game that their backs were against the wall. OU basketball, their backs were against the wall. They lost two really tough games at home to Texas and Texas Tech, including just a brutal loss against Texas Tech, a game they led by 9 with 7 minutes to go. And it was going to be an uphill climb on Tuesday night going to Kansas State. You know, OU was 3-4 in conference play. You risk falling even further down the conference standings. You start wondering about what the rest of the Big 12 schedule looks like. And it wasn't the prettiest game in the world. Might have been the ugliest game in the world. But OU pulls out a 73-53 win over the Wildcats in Manhattan. Maybe not a season-saving win, but it was a much, much needed victory for this Oklahoma team. We are here to break it all down on another episode of In the Paint, a basketball YouTube series fueled by OU Insider and the Rivals Network. I am Jesse Crittenden. I am joined as always by Brody Luskin. Brody, this OU team, it wasn't pretty. It was not pretty, but I mean, how big was this win last night just to stabilize some things after a tough week last week?
It's massive. I mean, 4-4 sounds a lot better than 3-5. And so I mean, definitely like that's the type of game where you burn the film. I mean, what is there to take away from that? But at the end of the day, it's a huge conference win. I mean, to go and get any road win in the Big 12 is going to be huge. And the fact that Oklahoma went into Kansas State and grabbed a win, and Porter Moser, he's going to finish 2-1 in games at Bramlage. So that's impressive for him and to just this team to be able to go in there and get a win. I mean, it was a very weird game, very ugly game. Like, Kansas State didn't score for like the first 6-7 minutes of the game. And it wasn't necessarily because Oklahoma's defense was just great. Kansas State just couldn't hit a shot. And then you get into the second half and Oklahoma's in the bonus with 16 minutes to play. I mean, it was just the second half was just it was kind of back and forth. I don't think I've ever seen a team have a 10-point lead above a 10-point lead, and it just feels so uncomfortable.
There were 48 fouls total called last night. 48. Let me say that again. 48 fouls. The two teams combined for 64 free throws. It was a free throw fest. It was a game that took well over 2 hours. But you're right, Brody. This was the thing. OU came out. Kansas State's first points didn't come until near the 11-minute mark of the first half. OU had a 16-point lead going into halftime, but still, you're right. It didn't feel super comfortable. OU wasn't playing particularly well, and it was Kansas State's lack of shooting that gave them that halftime lead. Then all of a sudden, you're midway through the second half. It's a 7-point game. All of a sudden, OU can't hit anything at the free throw line, can't hit anything. And it looks like Kansas State is a shot or two away from that crowd getting in it. All of a sudden, maybe it's a 3 or 4 point game. Now, all of a sudden, you think about the second half issues that OU had against Texas Tech and Texas, games that OU led both those games at halftime too, before falling in the second half. You think, oh my God, is this going to be a rematch of that? Instead, OU goes on a 12-1 run once Kansas State cut it to 7 and really took control. It wasn't a threat after that. And you kind of mentioned it, man. I mean, it is sort of one of those games you burn the film. I mean, OU shot 21% from 3. Kansas shot 30% overall from the field, but I do think there are a couple of things we need to talk about. Let's talk about the good first. And the first one is Jalen Moore continues to assert himself as arguably the most important player on this team, which is kind of a crazy thing to think about. At least in conference play, he's been sensational for the most part, Brody. Last night, 23 points, 9 rebounds. It was a career high 23 points. He was 8 of 11 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3. The rest of the team outside of Jalen Moore from 3 was 1 for 11. Then you look at what he's done in conference play in 8 games, Brody. He's second on the team in scoring at 11 points per game. He's 55% from the field, and he leads the team in rebounding in conference play. I think there's a pretty clear-cut argument to be made that he has been maybe not most important, but most impactful player for this OU team. Just how big was Jalen Moore? How needed was Jalen Moore last night for this team?
He was massive. And the first, 10 minutes of the game, I think that game probably could have been 0-0 if it wasn't for Jalen Moore. I mean, he hit a bunch of different, big shots. His two threes were huge. He's really shooting the ball a lot better than I expected him to. And he's just playing a lot better than I expected him to. Jalen Moore, I think he's averaging 12 points at Big 12 play so far. He's had a couple games where he's gotten up into the 20s, the 18s. He's been huge. I mean, his defense has been really good. He always has a ton of energy. He's good at finishing around the rim. His rebounding's been really good, and he's shooting good. He's not been a liability from behind the arc. And so you kind of had Milos Uzin, didn't really do anything offensively last night. Otega Owe didn't really do anything offensively last night. And so to have Jalen Moore step up in the absence of Uzin and Owe offensively, it was huge. I mean, he was kind of that guy that was getting them buckets in the first half. He had 15 first half points. So Moore was massive, and he's been massive so far in conference play.
The other big thing, man, and this is the one that I think really gave OU fans a big sigh of relief, is they finally got a Javian McCollum game. Finally, Javian McCollum stepped up. And I mean, it wasn't his best game of the season, but it was a much needed good game for Javian. I mean, in the 3 games heading into last night, he was averaging 10 points per game on 29% shooting. He just a bad slump from arguably their most important offensive player. Last night, he bounces back 21 points, 6 of 13 shooting. Almost, you wouldn't even normally think about this, but 9 of 10 from the free throw line ended up being humongous. And we'll talk about the free throw shooting here in just a little bit, but he was 9 of 10 there. And I think the most important thing is 0 turnovers. Turnovers have been the issue for Javian McCollum in conference play. 0 turnovers. What was different for him last night, Brody? To me, it just didn't feel like he wasn't forcing the issue quite as much as he has been in the past. But for you, what stood out about the way Javian played?
The 0 turnovers was the biggest thing for me because conference play, obviously, when you transfer from Siena, he's got to adjust. The Big 12 is the best conference in college basketball. So there's always going to be a little bit of adjustment. But his 3-point shot, he didn't hit a 3. It wasn't really falling. But for him to score 21 points and have 0 turnovers, to me, that's very impressive. And he had just many shots around the rim that were tough shots. He had like a hook shot. He kissed it off the glass. It was impressive. And again, the 9 of 10 shooting from the free throw line was also huge, but I think the turnovers, seeing him kind of adjust because he had 2 straight games where he had 6 turnovers and he cut it down to 0. And that was just the biggest takeaway for me from McCollum's game. You can tell that he's starting to adjust to conference play.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Javian doesn't have to score. It's not about scoring 20 every game, but he cannot let teams take him out of games. And that's what happened against Texas Tech. I mean, he had 0 points in the second half against Texas Tech, but you are seeing how well-rounded this OU team is outside of him, that even with him scoring 0 points in the second half against Texas Tech, they still finished with 84. But for this OU team to reach its ceiling, for it to make a run, for it to finally get back to the postseason, they need games like last night where he's involved, where he's making plays. Now, there's some other positives we could talk about, Brody. I think, one, they only had 9 turnovers as a team. They won the points out turnover battle 19-7. They won the total rebounding battle. They killed Kansas State in the paint 40-18. They won 14-5 in fast break points. There's a lot of good things to talk about. However, there is a couple other tough things we need to talk about. And the first one is free throw shooting. Last night, 24 of 39. That is 62% free throw shooting. That's 62% from the line. Now you might be thinking, look, that's a one-off. It's not that big of a deal. It's on the road. You throw that game out. But when you look at what they did from the free throw line against Texas Tech, when they went 15 of 24, 63%, that cost them that game. Their inability to shoot efficiently from the free throw line cost them against Texas Tech. Last night, thankfully, for the Sooners, they made enough plays down the stretch where it didn't matter, but that was the reason why Kansas State was able to hang around, was because OU was missing shots from the free throw line. How much is this a 2-game weird aberration from a team that LOIs has been good shooting free throws all year? Or is this, after back-to-back sub 65% free throw shooting games, is there a level of concern moving forward?
there's a level of concern because I remember after the North Carolina game, we were talking about the poor free throw shooting in that game. So this has kind of been an issue that we've seen kind of all throughout the year. And Sam Godwin, I think he missed 6 free throws.
3 and 9.
Owe missed 4, I'm pretty sure. And so those you just got to make free throws, especially in a game where it seems like every single possession was just a free throw. So it's the OU's lucky that it didn't come back to bite them in this game, but that's definitely the number one thing that they have to work on. I mean, I think without a doubt, it's the number one thing.
No, I agree. And that's like it's a testament to OU that they were able to overcome that. And Porter said it before the game yesterday. He said it during Monday's availability. They had to get back to defense. Their defense against Texas and Texas Tech was awful. And while Kansas State did just miss some shots, OU's defense was good yesterday. It was good.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it is a testament that they were able to overcome that. But you mentioned that. You mentioned Ortega, 0 of 4 from the free throw line. And conference play for him has just been the definition of up and down. But Brody, for him, 8 games of conference play for Ortega Owe. He's third on the team. He's third in the team in scoring, which is great. 10 points per game. He is shooting 33% overall, 22% from the 3-point line. So you and I both talked about that hot 3-point shooting was going to come down at some point. K-State was inviting him to shoot threes, and he did, and he couldn't make them pay. He's shooting 56% from the free throw line. It's been now he's had some good moments. He had some steals last night. He leads the team in steals in conference play. He's averaging 5 rebounds a game, so it hasn't been all bad. But when you look at the fact that he's second on the team in shot attempts, yet he's shooting 33% from the field, what do you do if you're the coaching staff? What do you do with Ortega, who clearly he's athletic, clearly he's good defensively, clearly he can make an impact here, and here, but he's taking a lot of shots for a guy who's not making very many shots. What do you do here if you're the coaching staff?
I don't know because his defense has been good enough to where you can't really, justify benching him that much because you like Latrey Darthard's not really making shots either. And
No,
so
he's not.
Owe, he's some of his shots, like he shot a lot of 3-pointers last night because, like you said, they were daring him to shoot. Those are bad shots. There were also some shots where it's like, that's a layup. You got to make that shot. And that's kind of happened throughout all of conference play. And another weird part about that, his performance last night, I was looking through the stats, and obviously, not really any of them made any sense because it was a super ugly game and OU won by 20. But Owe led the team in plus minus with, I think, 22, which was just weird because I didn't think he played very well at all. His defense, he did have some good moments, but he just missed a lot of open shots, and he's got to improve. And one, I think it would be beneficial for him to maybe take a little bit less 3-point attempts. That one at the start of the game, I didn't think was a bad one because maybe he was hitting all of a sudden. But once you miss 2, that's when you got to look for a better shot. And his driving has been good, but he's just not finishing. He's getting solid looks when he drives. He's just not making them. And so for the coaching staff, I don't know. It's a very difficult situation to handle because maybe you bring his minutes down a little bit and play Soares even more. But Soares is already playing like 27 minutes a game. So it's very weird.
It is. And you mentioned, Soares, again, after a 19 and 10 double against Texas Tech, he had another good game last night, like 11 points, 5 rebounds. He was the only one that hit a 3 outside of Jalen Moore. So actually, if you take away Jalen Moore, his 2 of 3 and Rivaldo Soares is 1 for 1. The team shot 0 of 10 from 3 outside of those 2 guys.
K-State shot even worse somehow. They were like 11%.
Yeah. So that's it. Look, it's a hodgepodge of good and bad. And we've talked about the good and bad, but now, on Saturday, OU goes to UCF, which will be it'll be the official halfway point of conference play for this team. Look, OU's 16-5. They've already surpassed last year's win total. They won 5 games in conference play last year. They've already won 4 this year with more than half of the season left to go. There's a lot of positives, but Brody, overall, this UCF team, they're 12-7. They're 3-4 in conference play. Any road game is hard to win, but it should be a game OU can win. so instead of maybe focusing on that game specifically, what has stood out to you overall about this team through 8 conference games, and what are you going to be looking for as we go through the next couple of weeks of conference play?
I'm kind of looking for everything to just click because, at this point, it seems like every single time we see Jalen Moore go get 23 points or Otega Owe have a nice game or Soares put up 19, someone else just really doesn't appear. Look at Texas Tech. Soares had 19. McCollum didn't score in the second half. So we're seeing Moore start to play a lot better, and we're seeing McCollum start to make improvements. I'm looking for guys like Uzan and Owe to start getting their 8-9 points a game, figure out the best way for them to contribute with Moore having his success, Soares having his success. And I'm just kind of looking for how it's going to mesh together, because I think at this point, that one is huge. And if you could go on the road Saturday and win it, it makes up for your 2 losses in a way. Obviously, you would have liked to win those 2 games last week. And then, you got to beat Oklahoma State twice. But I think I'm just looking for this team to kind of all come together and all start to play well. I mean, I think this is a team that doesn't necessarily need to have someone go get 20 points tonight, because if they're all kind of playing well, I think they can have some depth scoring. And then another thing I'm looking for is those 2 guys, Hughley and Darthard on the bench. They just haven't played well recently. I'm looking for them to be able to step up and contribute more minutes, because that is also going to raise the overall ceiling of this team. So it is very encouraging to see them go on the road and win by 20 points in a game that was an ugly game, especially with the success that Moore and McCollum had. But I think if everything can kind of mesh, OU can get back to, maybe some of the expectations we had about them going into conference play.
No, you're right, and that's the thing. Look, that's life in conference play. Look, you lose 2 games at home, which losing 2 games at home or back-to-back home games, it can be a death sentence. And those are games that OU had chances to win and didn't, but then you go on the road and win by 20. That's life in the Big 12. And OU right now, again, 4-4 in conference play. Joe Lunardi at ESPN currently has OU as a 6th seed. So things look good. They look pretty good for OU right now. If they had lost last night, things feel pretty bad, but right now they feel okay. But we've still got more than half of the conference season to go. There's a lot of things that could happen. And I think you're right, Brody. Now it's about trying to find some consistency, trying to, I think you can afford a game like Texas Tech. You can maybe afford one of those, but in the future, moving forward, it doesn't take much to start dwindling and falling down the standings, and all of a sudden you miss the NCAA tournament. But right now, if you're okay, I guess I'll end it this way. If you're trying to look at this through a fan's point of view, OU season so far, how would you grade what OU's done to this point?
That's a tough question. I would say you got to go with a B, because it's not an A. An A would have been going out and beating Texas and Texas Tech. But in comparison to last season, I mean, it's definitely a lot of improvement. And they have, they're in position to make the NCAA tournament, which I think was everyone's goal and is everyone's goal as a fan. And so I would go with a B. It's not a C. I think a C would be a little bit too low on them, but it's not an A. So I think a B is pretty much a perfect grade for them so far.
I agree. I think if they had lost last night, things feel a little different. But I think after last night's win, I think a B is the right answer. We'll see what happens this weekend against UCF. They play Baylor tonight at home, and then it's OU UCF at 3 p.m. On Saturday on ESPN Plus. Should be an interesting one. UCF kind of struggled a little bit out of the gate, but we know road wins, home wins in the Big 12, any kind of win isn't easy. Should be an interesting one, but if OU can get that one, they go to above 500 in conference play. Would obviously be a big one. We will be here next week, Brody, to break it all down on another episode of In the Paint. Make sure to hit the like and the subscribe button if you want to make sure to find this next episode on the OU Insider YouTube channel. If you're not a VIP member over at OUinsider.com, make sure to go ahead, head over there, go ahead and subscribe. You're going to find tons of content, football, recruiting, basketball, softball season starts in a week. It's crazy. The softball season's right around the corner. A lot of stuff you won't want to miss. Until then, we'll be with you guys next week on In the Paint.